Okay, we're up and rolling. Welcome. I'm Rick DiClemente with Astrology Unplugged tonight, and I think I lost a few people and scared them away because of our topic with all these bad guys and all these infamous guys. And I'll tell you what I've learned because I've done charts on everybody, good guys, bad guys, and you'll learn a lot more about astrology by following the bad guys. You just do. The good guys are up and going to Walmart. The bad guys got tension in their chart, tremendous tension, and that's what makes them blow sometimes. And the people we're going to see tonight, such as Jim Jones and Koresh and Hubbard, there are a lot of great people in the world that have the same chart. They're born the same day. Mm-hmm. They don't manifest the same way. So studying bad guys has to be done very, very carefully. And another thing you're going to learn, say you want to do the chart of the time when the British burned down the White House, 1812. Well, you're going to look at the American chart, you'll see nothing. Say one of your in-laws jumps off a roof and kills himself. You look at their chart. Sometimes there's nothing in the chart. Get used to that. It's a very difficult science, very difficult. And the reason why is you don't know what that experience means to them. Mm-hmm. Say all of us, say us 6 people. I got all your microphones turned on. Say all 6 of us belong to the same family, and our father gets in a car wreck and dies tonight. And all 5 of your charts, it's all torn up, and then in my chart, there's nothing going on. That's not uncommon. And it might mean that the 5 of you get along pretty well with him, and I don't. I don't know. But you got to be very careful, and I've gotten a lot of flack this week because I've decided to cover Larry Nassar and Marshall Applewhite and Martin Shkreli and L. Ron Hubbard, David
you want to come up here? Come up here. Come on.
And Jim Jones. Well, you know, I can understand why people are feeling uneasy with it, but that's okay because I study them very academically. I'm not saying I'm for these people. So let's get working. And I did a lot of pre-studying with these charts of infamous people, and I want to show you what's happening. And in every case, when you really get down to it, is that Cosmo?
Yeah. Yes.
You've all got your microphones turned on.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn them off, but you will be able to turn them on if you want to. Okay, we're getting some feedback, and that's the reason why. Okay. All right. So when you study these charts deeply, even Hitler, whatever, every case, it's about wanting to go back to God. Because it's the only motivation that's really, really real. It's at the base of everything. And you wouldn't believe Waldo, you wouldn't believe how many people suffer because they can't feel like other people feel. And the other thing that you learn clearly with a lot of astrology is how much incredible tons and tons and tons of projecting is going on. It's unbelievable. And that's the stuff we should have a class in projecting 101, 102, 103, 104. We should have a class in projection every year we're in school. Because that's the main thing we're dealing with in life. So anyhow, I picked some people out. I didn't ignore the women. I looked at some women. I wasn't impressed with the charts. I picked people according to their charts, but I didn't necessarily pick men. And there's no doubt most bad guys are men to begin with. So, all right, let's get ready. Starting with the chart of Jim Jones. I think this is because I watched a special the other night from people that survived, and I saw that some of Jim Jones's secretaries and assistants really had a lot to do with the planning of the whole thing with the drinking of the Kool-Aid and 900 people taking their lives in South America. Anyhow, you have to ask yourself what gives, I know as I've learned, I always ask, why did this person do what they did? What got into them? And that's how I learned a lot about transits through my 40 years, is I would look at the natal chart and I would look at the event. What got into Mr. Jim Jones? How did he pull this off? In his case, his was a collective process. It was not him doing this to another individual one-on-one. It was part of the collective. This was remember, Jim Jones went off November 18th of 1978. So we were still feeling some repercussions from the 60s, no doubt. And of course, he was an egomaniac, and usually these people have very seemingly strong personalities. They're pseudo-strong. They're really very weak, but they're pseudo-strong. One of the interesting things about this is what you find in astrology, a lot of people are really pretty weak. And what I mean by that, they're not very good at following their own instincts. When I get an instinct to go do something, I get up and do it. It takes a lot of balls. A lot of people want to say no and shove it down and follow somebody else. Okay, and then I'm sure that Mr. Jones had a lot of good things happening in Jonestown also. They lasted many years, the People's Temple. What built to that tragic day? Okay, so let's take a look. There's Jan, there's the transits of today. Let's take a look here. Okay, Jim Jones. I will get it on your screen directly. All right, here's Jim Jones' chart. The first several I have the birth time for. The last few I don't, which is why I threw out the charts of Manson and Weinstein, because I didn't have the birth time, and I don't like working without the birth time. Okay, this is Jim Jones. We have a 10 p.m. birthday, 10 p.m. birth time, which is questionable, because most people aren't born on the hour. But we noticed right away with this chart, we see a very strong bucket pattern. He's got a sun next to Chiron in Taurus, but we see a bucket pattern to a very strong Saturn in Capricorn in the first house, with Capricorn rising, and the Saturn is opposite Pluto, and the Saturn is opposite Jupiter. Very strong stuff. Saturn, Pluto, when you look at it in an individual's chart, has a lot to do with carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. It's a very karmic application here. Now, remember, even in the videos, right moments before these people died, they told the camera, because you're so corrupt, you, the world, you would not let us be. And you're forcing us to do this. I mean, talk about the victim mindset. You're forcing us to do this because the world is not a place that we can live in. That was his mindset. Now, keep in mind, this is something Liza and I have talked about a lot, and it's inferred when you read the Exquisite Zodiac. People that have early signs of the zodiac energy, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, they're relatively not universal. They live in a smaller, simpler world. People who have a lot of Aquarius, Pisces, Capricorn are the opposite. They live in a very big, large, complex world. Most people are a mixture of a lot of things. A lot of times what you get with people like Jim Jones is you got the inner planets mixing with the outer planets, but the inner planets are not strong enough to handle the outer planets. This is one reason that you see, like Muhammad, you see so many leaders who start off so high and they're authentic, and then they can't handle it and they end up doing things that are rather low. They have the outer planets channels open, but they can't handle it the personal level, and they end up doing things that I would call more shadow side. Okay. Now, one of the things you get with Taurus, and when I wrote newsletters, I remember doing a newsletter with about 15 Tauruses who were very strong leaders in the world. Tito, Hitler, Marx, just so many, because they got the capacity. Aries and Taurus and Leo. I would say those three. Aries and Taurus and Leo. They have the capacity to sound convincing, to sound like they've got it figured out. And one of the great things, if you look at it that way, about Taurus is Taurus makes everything seem so simple. Aries oftentimes is very convincing. Leo is very convincing. All the fixed signs are very convincing. So you mix that together with a lot of the Aries that Mr. Jones had. Take a look at what you get. All right. You've got a Taurus sun next to Chiron. Well, I've been studying people with Chiron and Taurus, and what I have found, without a doubt, they're collectors. And what Mr. Jim Jones was doing was collecting people. He was collecting people. He found the value in amassing a group of people. Now, usually with something like this, there is an authentic, heartfelt mission that really wants to do well, or wants to do God's will, if you will. Where does that come from? Well, usually it's a Jupiter thing, and we see Jupiter's at 16, and we see Uranus is at 17. This is very heavy duty. Jupiter, Uranus, when they're this close and square, usually somebody who gets excited and goes off the wall without thinking about it. You've got a very stable, strong sun in Taurus. You've got a moon in Aries. Already you've got the first two signs of the zodiac. Moon in Aries, Uranus in Aries, North Node in Aries, Venus in Aries, Mercury in Taurus, stationary, Chiron in Taurus, Sun in Taurus. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 indicators already in the first two signs. These are very localized planets that really have a hard time channeling Neptune. Even though he's got a real big, strong antenna up on top of the roof, so to speak, he's got the connection to God. He's got the desire to do God's will. It's very probable that all the energy is being focused for greedy, selfish needs. This is what you will see also when you look at Martin Shkreli's chart. You got Capricorn rising. The chart is ruled by Saturn. The Saturn is at 23, square to Venus, the ruling planet of Taurus. So this, you know automatically with Saturn square to Venus and with the moon wrapped around the nadir, you all know automatically that there's a very good chance, you can't say for sure, but there's a very good chance that this man was unable to open his heart. He was able to manipulate, but he wasn't really able to share his true feelings. Why? One of the reasons was his moon is so strong, he was really so sensitive, he didn't trust. Okay, that's one of the ways that this happens. And this is one of the great reasons why you study charts like this. The Jupiter-Pluto has a lot to do with power struggles, power over people, and we see that the huge T-square, 16, 19, 23, the huge T with T-square is going down to Uranus and Venus. Well, that's really powerful. This whole T-square, the energy is all being focused through Venus and Uranus. Well, do you think Venus, Uranus has a little bit of pizzazz and charisma with people? Well, hell yes. The leader, follow me. I know what I'm doing. And for the followers that were sitting back going, well, I'm not really sure. Not really sure. You going through that Venus, Uranus, I don't know how he's going to pull it off, and I'm following him. And after a while, if you tried to leave, they shot you. Okay. So what do? Is we superimpose the evening of November 18th of 1978, which is the day of the massacre, the Kool-Aid and the shooting of the senator. So we pull this chart up. I got to do a couple of things here. And we put on the outer wheel 11/18/78. And now I've got it, but I've got to put it on your screen. Okay, so now we see where the outer planets were on the day of the massacre, and look at the inner chart hasn't changed. All right, we know that the Saturn is very sensitive, opposite Pluto, Jupiter, opposite T-squared, all this stuff. And opposite all this stuff, we find transiting Pluto. The death planet. Those people died. I don't know a lot about it, but in a lot of ways, those people died as part of an expression of the shadow side of all of us on Earth. This was a shadow thing to the collective. Pluto was at 1641. Notice, it was stationary that day. I don't know if it was going forward and stopped or going backward and stopped, but it was stationary. That was your trigger. It sent its shock waves over 1641. Right across is Uranus. So right there is that T-squared to Uranus, Venus. That's a real sensitive point in the chart. So we know okay, so we didn't have to see much when we know the whole chart's critical area is right here. It's right at that point, and transiting Pluto had moved from here to here. And Pluto hit there. Now, I'll tell you what really happens, and this will make you understand what's going on with Pluto now. He didn't go from one day sitting in a prayer meeting to giving up and giving everybody Kool-Aid. It was a process. It took time. I think some people lived there 20 years. So as Pluto got around, as he was growing up, getting older, as Pluto got in this area, and I believe in 1971 is when Pluto started into Libra. So as of 71, 7 years before the event, Pluto entered Libra, sending its shockwaves over to all these Aries planets. So this thing started to grow 7 years before the event. And as Pluto got to 16, 17, whatever it was, as it was in that area, the era was set up. He had the thoughts. They started planning. He's starting to figure it out. What do you think happened when transiting Mars got 17 here? When transiting Mars got here? When transiting Mars got here? And transiting Mars got here? Or eclipses. That's when things bubble to the surface before. This is why you study guys like this. You learn. Finally, one day, everything was, quote, the perfect storm for his cause. Now, I happen to think that a lot of this I've been studying, a lot of this gets mixed up with what people call Chiron sun. All right. What I'm trying to say is when you really follow the true nature of Chiron, you start to see that it has a lot to do with your feeling of you're doing your purpose. And a lot of people can go with their purpose, and they can also get lost in their purpose and twist it around. And a lot of people start to fail, so they start to twist their purpose. You get my point? It gets all mixed up. And he's born with the sun next to Chiron. Well, what does the sun do? the sun is a ruling planet of Leo. So we saw a mixture between his purpose, which was collecting, and the ego, the sun next to Chiron. So we see when we revisit his chart that he did have outer planets that were helping him along. He had some true inspiration, but eventually it just became a power trip, a power trip, a power trip, which is why in my notes I wrote down to look at Jim Jones's sixth harmonic. Okay, here's your sixth harmonic. Now, to remind you, I work a lot with harmonics. I've had a lot of luck with two mainly. The sixth harmonic, which I call the destiny or one's hero's journey, and the 12th harmonic, which is the spiritual transcript. This is his sixth harmonic. This is when he took the slave, what was his purpose to do what? Look at this. Neptune is the planet of poison. Look at this huge T-square to Mercury-Neptune. Okay? Well, he didn't say, I'm going to take a lifetime so I can poison a bunch of people. But what he did do is he knew his answers were not on the material plane. They existed somewhere else. And that's why he was able to twist things and brainwash people into, well, you're not letting us live our life, so we may as well die together and we'll be martyred, much like you'll see with Marshall Applewhite. So we can see here the Chiron, Pluto, Jupiter, and the maniacal Mars, Uranus. Whenever you have heavy ninth house, you have somebody who really has great capacity to stir up the masses through speaking. Ninth house, Sagittarius. And this is certainly him getting people stirred up, and he did it by doing everything by twisting true spirituality. And at the basis of all this stuff, hidden where few knew, was his son Saturn in Aquarius. So, in other words, he put a grasp on them. He didn't know exactly what to do with them, but he kept them prisoner. So I'll move on for him in a second, but I want to show you when we put the night of the event on top of that chart, on top of the sixth harmonic. Huh. How did I get that so easily? All right. All right. On top of the sixth harmonic, Pluto was at 21. This is Jim Jones' sixth harmonic, and Jim Jones the transit. That's wrong. That's incorrect. Okay, we want to take a look at November 18th of 78. All right. Now I've got the chart of his sixth harmonic with the transits on it during that event. And what did I tell you? Everything in that chart went through Mercury, Neptune. And look at where Pluto was. Pluto was at 18, sitting right on there. I don't care what the rest of the chart shows. You don't need anything else. That's all you need to see. Pluto was at that point. Now, what it really means is this. What Jones really needed to do was to say, I've picked up a lot of things in spirit. I've picked up a lot in my studies, but I'm unable to handle it. And he should have learned to keep his mouth shut and learn from somebody else. Which is what happened to Muhammad. Muhammad was a beautiful, very strong leader. And he became very corrupt, and he fell from year to year dramatically. Most of them are not going to admit it. They're not going to give it up. They got all the free women stopping at night. Everybody's cooking for him. Everybody's bowing down to him, etc., etc. But you see the point. You don't see playground happening here. You see the critical points in the chart being hit And that's why most astrologers are not going to find it, because it's not in the natal chart. It was in the sixth harmonic. So in his sixth harmonic, which was his purpose, as Pluto was approaching that critical point, he had to either blank or get off the bus. He had to either give it up and come to your knees or surrender, or else go through with the catastrophe. And that's why you see so many phenomenal things happening to people when they surrender. I had a lady in my house the other day, beautiful woman, in her 50s or 60s. She was a Capricorn. She had a very strong moon right at the top of the chart. So I knew she was very, very Cancerian. And what I could see by reading her chart, she was waking up, because people don't come to me days after Uranus going into Taurus for some other reason. When Uranus goes into Taurus, that's what you look at when they get here during those times. So I looked in her chart and I saw her waking up, and I really frankly talked with her for a while, and she had no idea what waking up meant. She had a husband who had just survived 2 cancer scares. She had 4 very dependent children. She had a household. Everything was starting to fall apart. Why? Because the father was under Neptune. He was under a spiritual crisis, and he wasn't dealing with it. So what does Pluto do? What does Pluto do? It hits her where she lives. It hit her in her security. With a strong moon at the top of the chart, we know she's hung up on being secure, to the degree that everything else becomes secondary. And I kept telling her, as a Capricorn, you can't keep being lied to. You can't keep allowing Capricorn to lie to you. As long as you stay in color inside the box, you'll be okay. Is a lie. So what did she do? I said, did you notice a week ago when Uranus went into Taurus? What happened? She said, well, I don't know, but I had it up to here, and I went out on my deck and I screamed. She said, I have no idea what the hell happened, but from that day on, everything got better. I said, you surrendered. You surrendered. So what she was really saying was, I had to interpret in my language, you get your identity by being mommy and by being wife and by making 4 kids enabled. Okay? And your identity, you think, is based upon how well the house is structured, and daddy's got to survive, and daddy can't lose his job, daddy can't die, all these things can't happen. And I say, your chart is about now finding your strength from within. She finally saw it. She saw it. She saw it. I said, when you went outside on a deck, and she lives 60 miles away, 80 miles away, and you screamed for help, do you think I could hear it or not? Me. Who do you think lined me up with you? It wasn't me consciously, but it was me. I'm part of her answer. She came with her best friend. You know you got a Cancer. You know you got a Cancerian personality when the whole time you're talking, they keep going. You ask them a question and they're looking at their friend for the answer. Dependent. But you can't shake her up too much. You know, I started to introduce this to her. She started to see the idea. She really started to wake up very fast. You could just see the light bulbs coming on. But when she went out and screamed for help, that was part of an indirect message that came to me, and she found me somehow. I'm not getting goofy about it. I do my thing. She could have been sent to all kind of healers, but she got the message. She got the message. So if you're getting the message and you're dealing with it, fine. If you can't deal with it, surrender. But don't BS yourself. And the worst thing you can do is what these people do on this list. They take everybody down with them. Terrible. A wonderful experience. And when we were done, we gave big hugs to each other, and I was so happy for her. And she has my phone number, and she's going to wake up in pieces. But she said she's going to go home and tell the kids, I can't keep doing everything for you. You're in your 30s. Well, why was she doing everything for them anyway? She wasn't doing it for them. She was doing it for herself. Cancer energy equals one thing. Equals fear of being abandoned. I said, that's why you're doing it for her. You're afraid you're going to be abandoned. It's understandable. There's no place for judgment. Right, Suzanne? There's no place for judgment in any reading, at any time, for any reason. People are doing the best they can. They're not ready till they're ready. It was a marvelous experience. I get quite high and very excited to have the opportunity to be involved in these kind of energy exchanges. It's really very rewarding. Let's take a look now at Mr. David Koresh. Oh, Leo. Let's see here. Let's get him on your screen. You recall, maybe Mr. David Koresh was the guitarist, right? And he was leading his little flock and ended up with the fire at Waco, Texas, which was April 19th, as we changed from Aries to Taurus, of 1993. Okay, now again, you're going to see the early sign of Leo. He's got the brilliance 6 degrees away from Uranus. He's got the flashes of brilliance. He's very creative. He's got the Venus and Mars in the very crafty sign of Virgo, very charismatic, very powerful Venus-Mars, but almost always Venus-Mars, almost always is narcissistic. Sometimes it's repressed in the sign of Virgo because Virgo is so virtuous. But in his case, I do believe we get the narcissism. Look at the T-square here. What are we finding here? 23, 25, come straight across the sun. Sun opposite Chiron, 23, 25, T-square to Jupiter in Scorpio. So what do you get when you get a big T-square to Jupiter? You get very Sagittarian energy. Hey, let's go. Let's do it. We can do it. Let's all pray together. Let's get moving. Strong Jupiter energy. I don't know about you guys, but through my studies, I have found the most manipulative people, the real calculators, are people with Virgo energy. Now, I'm going to tell you, most Virgos are straight as an arrow. They're wonderful people. They're very pure, and they're not going to manipulate you. But when you get it mixed up in the chart with other stuff, like you see these criminals who've planned everything, and they got these legal sheets of all the details, how they're going to rob the bank, and when they got to do all these things in a certain order, buy this stuff, and get the tape, and get the scissors. Those are Virgo plans. You better, you got a Virgo after you. You got somebody with Virgo energy after you. You better watch out. Pluto and Virgo generation. Partially. Okay. Now, in Koresh's chart, we do have a birth time. Notice Saturn wrapped around the nadir within 1 degree. 1 degree away. Okay, usually when that's the case, when Saturn retrograde is that strong, it is almost always, through experience, it is almost always an inability to fuse with the father. I see many charts with Saturn in Virgo, I see many charts with Saturn retrograde, and I ask, is the father distant? And they say, no, it's no problem. There's no problem at all. But when I see the Saturn retrograde in an important place, like right next to the sun or right on one of the angles, almost always, the father was distant. And it's not cruelty. It's they were in the military, they were on the road, they're a truck driver, but they didn't fuse and get the love from the father. And a lot of times what happens with Saturn like this is the child ends up spending their life trying to appease the father. They're always trying to appease this invisible father. Okay, so we see that's really strongly at play here, and we see that that's completely opposite this Jupiter energy. Here you got this, woohoo, let's do it. Here you got this very controlled, very closed down, not trusting energy, right? You got the moon in Aquarius, which is very excitable because it's opposite Uranus, which promised that he would live in a really unusual type of place or arrangement. That's what the moon is, your lifestyle. Okay, so we see the sun is near Pluto, and we see that the 60s, I got tons of people in my charts, tons of people with Uranus next to Pluto that were born in the 60s. See, his was still forming. Uranus was still approaching Pluto, and it was not to hit Pluto till 65. But as the 60s was forming, these tumultuous volcanic planets of Uranus and Pluto, 6 degrees, 7 degrees, 10 degrees. So the sun is really pretty close to the midpoint of these two. So what happens when you got the sun between Uranus and Pluto? Okay, first of all, you have to remember something. Hi, doggy. You have to remember something about Leos, and this is what I really think makes them tick. They are built, they are fed, they are informed by a sense that it ain't me. I'm not wrong. You're wrong. It ain't me. It's you. I'm not wrong. And this is where a lot of them go wrong, and they go into the dark side, and they become arrogant, and they're never wrong. This is where our current actor in the White House has a lot of this stuff, and he's never wrong, all right? A lot of the Leo energy is wonderful energy because it's really meant to get out of the insecurity, the hypersensitivity of Cancer, the sign before it. How do you get out of that hypersensitivity? Oh, I'm always wrong, and I'm really not sure, and I don't think I can do it. Leo comes along, and the energy says, you can do it. You can do it. Well, if that sense gets blown out of proportion, which it can do sitting between Uranus and Pluto, this guy starts to believe he's the chosen one. He can do anything. And you can better believe he was a machinist. Not a machinist. A machinator. A machinator. One who manipulates with the Venus, Mars, and Virgo. So it's all catching up with him, and you got tanks outside that eventually burn the place down, and you don't really care. The kids are dying with you. I think 23 kids went out of about 80 people. So what do? The ego can't take that on. You have to project it. Look what the bad government out there is doing to me. It had nothing to do with the government or the fire or the warnings and shots and all the TV coverage. This guy was heading down this path, and I haven't even looked really to remember, but this is a Plutonian thing. He ends up on fire, right? Everything burns to the ground. That's got to be Plutonian. So we look in this chart, and we see, again, April 19th of 93, Saturn is on the Chiron. Saturn is sitting on his mission, which is opposite his sun. So he's unable to really pull it off in a real way. Pluto is sitting here. Pluto's sitting on the T-square. I rest my case. Pluto's sitting at that point. You see, when the big planets hit you, if you're fortunate in one way and you're unaware, these planets go by and nothing happens because you don't vibrate at that level, as Stephen Poplin says. You're not aware of those deeper levels. You're not attuned to them. They pass by. People who are more aware go through trials and tribulations. People who are very strong, the planets go by and you get stronger. So we saw the Pluto arising, and I'll tell you exactly what I think happened with Koresh. And this could have happened without the fire, without the being in Waco at all. He got to a point where he had to either become the true leader with real substance for these people, or he had to give it up. But no, he's going to project it all on such a coward. He pushed it all onto the government, and I'm not saying what the government did was right. I mean, none of them should have died. It was horrible what happened. But you see what leads to these things. Now, here comes the magical question. Well, then why did 6 million people die in World War II? The Jews. It doesn't show up in 6 million people's charts. It's at the collective level. And this is something we're pretty ignorant about. We don't know much about it. We don't know enough about the collective level. And all I can say from my experience is that some of us have more, we owe more to the collective than other people do, and I don't know why. That's just what I feel. Did you see 2 people in a row? Pluto was at the point of the T-square. 2 people. Moving on, let's take a look at L. Ron Hubbard. Now, this is not a guy who blew up anything, but he may as well have. He's very underhanded. And he started out with some good intentions, but ended up with a very corrupt organization that spies on itself, that bars people from the organization. We can see that the man was a Pisces. But notice, and I've noticed a lot of Pisces that aren't that shiny. Notice this sun in Pisces, 21, 22 degrees, square to the ascendant. See the Pluto? The sun is square to Pluto, the sun is square to the ascendant. And Arroyo tells us that when you have a planet like this, and I've checked him out, and he's right. When you have a planet like this, you have a great big sun, which is the antithesis of a Pisces. So he's got this huge ego, and behind it all is this system that doesn't want to support his ego. You've got a built-in conflict. A built-in conflict. He's very ego-centered in a body that doesn't want to support the ego whatsoever. There's the basic conflict. Mars-Uranus promises he could get off on doing something kind of off the wall. We don't know enough yet. This certainly does look like another bucket pattern to Jupiter and Scorpio. 1911. We see the Pluto here in the house of counseling. This is where, in case you don't know much about Scientology, they spend a lot of time sitting you down and asking you questions with these little meters that sense your bodily electrical impulses, trying to brainwash you. So, the thing I found was interesting about him was not only the Pluto square of the sun, but the main thing I found interesting about him was his 12th harmonic. Here is the 12th harmonic. This is his spiritual history. I'm sorry, that's the 8th harmonic. Why do I got the 8th? 12th harmonic. I was testing it. All right. Okay, let's go to L. Ron Hubbard. Let's get his harmonics out. Let's do number 12. Okay. This is his spiritual background, what he's done for a long time. There it is. Okay, do you notice in the 12th harmonic, This is what he's done for lifetimes and lifetime. He's got Saturn and Chiron opposite Neptune, everything T-squared to Pluto. Through the third house. When you got an activated Pluto in the third house is the way you think, the way you program others, the mental programs that you use. Okay? You got another T-squared to Pluto, you got another T-squared to the Sun. So it looks to me like Hubbard was completely mixed up with this fight, which is so common between ego, non-ego, ego, non-ego. So what did he do incorrectly? What did he do on the shadow side? He was going to fix himself by fixing everybody else first. That's why he's all over the boob tube with Dianetics. He was out there blasting it, hitting the masses. He was out there trying to fix you instead of fixing himself. Another common theme. And like Ramdas says, the ones that are really holy, you're not hearing from them because they're busy in their cave doing their thing and they're peaceful. Martin Shkreli. You've been wondering about the drug prices lately, huh? Or did I get a kick out of this one? Pisces, another Pisces. Now, I'm sorry, I got the wrong one. Martin Shkreli. All right. Here you've got a Pisces with no birth time. So don't put too much importance on the sun being on the midheaven, because all charts without birth time, the sun ends up in this area. Okay. Well, what do you have here? You have Venus. I'm going to take a long time explaining this one to you. You have Venus and the moon, your two emotional input jacks. How does emotion get to you? Through two jacks. One's called the moon, one's called Venus. This is what you look for in a person to see their emotional status in a lot of ways. Moon may be in Taurus. If he's born in the morning, the moon's back in Aries. Venus in Aries, Mars in Aries. Opposite Pluto, Saturn. This, we need to slow down. This is a mouthful. Venus and the moon opposite Pluto, Saturn. Okay. What happens with people like this? I've seen many, many, many people like this who were no trouble at all. I've seen many people like this they were no trouble at all. So don't look at this like, oh my God. It's not the case. The reason most people aren't a problem with this is they internalize it. They keep it to themselves. They think they're screwed up instead of projecting it outward. What's the thing Mr. Shkreli's known for? The look on his face. The look that you want to slap and get off his face. The look of I'm better than you. And the smirk, right? Mr. Smirkology here. When you have your two emotional planets opposite Saturn and Pluto, what that means is when you're born, you may not even have any awareness of this. You are so threatened by the world. How am I going to live in this world with all these people that seem to be exchanging emotions in such an easy way? I have no idea how they're doing it. So what's your immediate reaction is to project it, to turn it around. I'm the one that can handle it. They can't. I'm the one that can do it. I'm the normal one. They can't do it. What the hell with them? They're so negative. I'll just raise their damn drug prices. I'll show them. Ron does. Arroyo spends a lot of time teaching us about oppositions. They're very complicated. They're very hard to read. the personality seems to ping pong, even when they're not aware of it. He's going to ping pong from the Venus Moon side to the Saturn Pluto, to the Moon side, to the Venus side, back to the Pluto. They ping pong back and forth. That's why a T-square is different, because a T-square's got an outlet. When you got the opposition, ping pong, ping pong, ping pong. When you got a T-square, all that gets channeled to that third point, which is why the T-square is so important. It's the outlet. Well, what happens with this guy? He just ping pongs. Now, I can guarantee you that this means in his past life, remember, he's a Pisces. In his past lives, he got the feeling, he got the confused message, and this is very common with people. He got the message that to do something for the person is wrong. To do something for yourself is wrong. That's greedy. It's selfish. You can't do that. He got all these mixed up messages. And he probably suffers from the simple ability to just be himself. Because in a past life, he was taught to be yourself is really greedy, it's really selfish, and no, no, no. And so what do? You come out and you screw everybody. What did Koresh do? He took everybody down with him. What did Jim Jones do? Took everybody down with him. What did L. Ron do? If I fix everybody out there, I'll be okay. We project everything instead of dealing with the problem. You know yourself. Look around the people you know. How many people do you know that run out of gas, they run out of leash, they don't know what they're doing, they give up and they say, I need help. It takes a big soul, doesn't it? It takes a big person to do that. I'm an alcoholic, I need help. Mainly, I think because we're just not taught right. We're just not taught right. Okay, I'm going to move on now. Mr. Shkreli, then we'll do Applewhite, and then we'll try to do Larry Nassar, a wonderful gymnastics coach. Mr. Shkreli was largely brought down in September of 2015. So let's take a look at that. Okay, here's Shkreli. And this is when it all hit the fan and he got embarrassed. We all got to look at his smirking face on TV. I'm just picking a date. It wasn't a certain one. Picking 9/10 of 2015. Okay, you don't need to look at his minor points. All you do is look at the major points. Okay, so now we see the outer wheel is where the planets were in September of 15, and we see his birth chart in the middle. You don't need to be concerned about much of it. Notice there are 3 planets in Leo, which is interesting. We have Chiron sitting on the Mercury. See the Chiron sitting on the Mercury? And Mercury in Pisces, anything that's Piscean rules drugs, it rules deception. Okay? And it rules scandals. The reason he had a scandal is because he wanted to have a scandal. That's why I had it. He could not stop himself. It's like going down the hill and you lost your brakes. He couldn't do it at the conscious level, so he did it at the unconscious level, and he had this huge scandal. And then what does he do? He smirks at everybody as if he's going to get over on us, right? There was the transit in Chiron. It was his spiritual crisis. Oh yeah, you keep doing this, you keep doing this, you keep doing this, you keep doing it. Planets getting closer, getting closer, getting closer, getting closer. Boom, Chiron hits. Well, let's see how well you're really doing. How spiritual are you really? And then he gets slapped in the face, a huge way, and it might take him lifetimes of tumbling backwards to regain his footsteps. But it's what it's all about, in my opinion. in my notes. Oh yeah, I want to show you one more thing. It was intriguing. During the events, do you notice how transiting Uranus, what did I get here? Transiting Uranus was square, oh, it was hitting Jupiter Uranus. Okay, never mind. Okay, we've got enough there. But what you have with him, is outer planets, Pisces energy, Neptune energy, Neptune square to the sun, and that really often leads to a self-deception as far as your identity. But it was mainly because the Pluto-Saturn couldn't handle it. The Venus and the Moon couldn't handle the Pluto-Saturn. And again, I keep seeing it. Chiron and Taurus. What did I, Miss Shanahan, what did I tell you? You can unmute yourself. You're all ready to go. What did I tell you Chiron and Taurus is about? Chiron and Taurus.
Oh, God. I don't know. I would interpret it as a wound built around their possessions and their value.
Exactly. Amassing and collecting. Getting more. I need more stuff. It will fix me. If I get more stuff, it will fix me.
I felt like I was in first grade getting called on, and I didn't know the answer.
Oh, you'll have to report to me after class. Okay, very good. I knew you had the answer. Thank you very much. One more to do, and that is an interesting chart. Well, we have two, actually. Let's do Marshall Applewhite. Marshall Applewhite, interesting chart. You recall he's the one that said, we're going to get on that comet when it comes by, and we're all going to wear Nike shoes. Woo! And we're going to get there and ride right to heaven, right? So you know he's extremely deluded. Another Taurus, Sun and Moon and Chiron. Sun and Moon and Chiron in Taurus. Look at the Aries planets, the Venus, Uranus, and the Mercury. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 more planets, 8, 9. You got 9 planets before the sign of Leo. All controlled by Saturn and Capricorn. So he was really into control, didn't have any idea what he's really doing, but where's the far out stuff come from? Going to live on a comet. You know it's got to be Uranian. Here's the Uranus-Venus at the tip of a T-square. Here's the Uranus-Venus at the tip of a T-square. Venus, the ruler of Taurus. Okay, so we see that they go kerflooey. The news shows us pictures of all these guys in their bed covered up with brand new Nike shoes on. Remember? March 26, 1997. What we do is we find out in Mr. Applewhite's 6th harmonic, in his 6th harmonic, this is his life's purpose chart. This is his destiny chart, his life's purpose. Look at where the T-square goes to. Mercury, Neptune, like we saw earlier. Mercury, Neptune. La La Land. La La Land. Okay? Saturn, Moon. So let's superimpose March 26th of 97. March 26th. March 26th, 97. Okay. We get it on your screen. Huh. It disappeared somehow. I lost it somehow. I'll get it back. Okay. There it is. Okay, March 20th. No, that's not right. That's not right. Let me get it again. Marshall Applewhite. And what happens, it makes errors. When you have too many wheels open, it just starts to make errors. We'll put in March 26th of 97. Okay, we'll put it on your screen. Okay, now remember, he's got the opposition going on here. He's got the 3. Okay. He's got, the main thing is in a harmonic chart, what's at the top? What calls him? What calls him is Pluto, Jupiter, Chiron in Capricorn. He's called, and look what was sitting on it. Neptune was sitting on this. Neptune was just about to hit the midheaven within a couple of days. Neptune at 2936. Neptune was crossing the midheaven, and it was sitting on Chiron. This is your purpose. This is what you've got to do. So he floated away with his brand new Nikes on. Okay, final chart. I couldn't find a lot in this, but I'm going to dig in anyway. Our wonderful gymnastics teacher, who's got what, 275 years in jail at Michigan State for the abuse of, I think it was 300 and some females on the gymnastics team. Here's Mr. Nassar. This one's going to surprise you. We have a Leo sun next to Venus, opposite Saturn, retrograde. So there's probably problems with the father. Remember, there's no birth time. We got the Pluto-Uranus in Virgo, so he's born during that 60s period. And during that 60s period, I have hundreds of charts where the Pluto-Uranus is opposite Chiron. Those people during the 60s had these 3 planets. Here's the Jupiter opposite Mars, T-squared to the moon. Here's the T-squared to Neptune. What I think is this guy was trying to, as perverted as it sounds, this was his way of looking for love. It's that exaggerated moon in Cancer. And when you have Cancer planets, the rules go out the window because your needs come first. And when you got a T-square to Neptune, combine that with a Leo sun, and do you see what's happening with Mr. Nassar? With Pluto being involved here in Chiron, what's happening here is he's definitely becoming a central figure of the Me Too. He's becoming a central figure for the waking up of we're not going to take it anymore, which is Eris. So in my opinion, he knew this was coming. The girls that went through this knew it was coming at the soul level. They're doing this for the collective to wake up the history of long abuse. Now, the interesting thing is in July of last year is when he kind of got nabbed and it went all over the place. Let's take a final look at that. Mr. Nassar, we will take a look at Mr. Nassar, and we will look at July 17th, 17. All right. Okay, so let's get that on your screen. Okay, now we see his birth chart in the middle. All right, remember there's no birth time. We got the outer planets there. Look at the Neptune on the Chiron. The Neptune on the Chiron. 14, 13, 11. This was the symbol of the contribution that was being made to the collective. He was the guinea pig. He was being sacrificed for what an animal he was. I have Neptune on the Chiron. So let's show, to simplify this, let's merely show you this. Okay, so the Chiron is, I got to get this on your screen. It's so interesting to see this because Chiron is the symbol of going to a doctor for help. It's the people that are wounded, want to get healing. And then Neptune comes over and hits this. Well, if the guy had been doing good work, he would have been publicized and it become famous for all the beautiful work that he was doing. Instead, it became the opposite. And what's happening is because the Pluto's involved, which is the condemning of the institutions, we're seeing that Michigan State knew a lot about it all along. So that is that. I will shut off the feed to YouTube. We'll say goodnight to them and we'll continue with your questions. Thank you, YouTubers.